Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Ian Wingfield. I'm the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And before we start meeting, I just have a few announcements to make, if I may. This meeting will be recorded by the council and uploaded to Southwark Council's YouTube channel by tomorrow. So if you want a cure for insomnia, you know where to go to. Please note, all guests will have their microphones muted when they join the meeting. You will be asked to remain on mute unless invited to speak. Please wait until I've given you permission to speak before unmuting your microphone. To ensure that this virtual meeting runs smoothly, only one individual should speak at a time. Any person speaking must be permitted to finish what they are saying without interruption. If I request that an individual stop speaking, they should do so immediately. If a member of the committee wishes to speak, could I ask them to indicate this via the chat function or the wave hands function if you have it available. Please note, all guests will be made attendees after they have entered the meeting. A message should now have shown on your screen to indicate that this has been done. Is that okay with the guests that we've got so far? Oh, I think is there a new guest that's joined us? Is that Abby? Yes. You can see it's okay and hear us okay. Hopefully, good. Right. Bearing in mind the recording of this meeting will be posted on the council's YouTube channel. If you are planning to speak at this meeting, you may choose to switch off your camera so that only your voice will be heard. So that's a matter for you. Members of the public who are disconnected from the meeting due to technical difficulties should use the link or dial-in instructions they were sent initially to return to the meeting. If a member of the committee or officer loses internet connection or power, they can please inform Fitzroy Williams, Everton Roberts of this via email or Microsoft Teams immediately, so that we can adjourn the meeting until the connection has been restored. Members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot, or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. Just make sure my profile's this way when you do it. A copy of the council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the Southwark website. And finally, in the interests of health and safety, as this has been raised at our previous two meetings, we'll be taking a 5 to 10 minute comfort break at the end of each hour of our session this evening or thereabouts. But hopefully we won't have to take too many, if I can stress that point. Okay, so moving on to the main agenda, you should have all seen a copy of the main agenda, plus there is a supplemental agenda number 1, which contains more information on other items that we will be considering, items 5 and 7. So if I could begin with apologies, which is item 1 on the agenda. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Peter Babudu, who is currently on paternity leave, and Martin Brecknell, the co-opted, one of our co-opted members. I don't think the other co-opted member is on the line at the moment. That's Lynette Murphy O'Dwyer. I haven't seen her in the meeting, so I don't think she's here either. Councillor Jack Buck should be joining us as a reserve for Councillor Babudu this evening. Is Councillor Buck in the meeting yet? I don't think he is at the moment. Can I just check, are there any other apologies for this evening's meeting, Jane?
Thank you, Chair. Just apologies for lateness from Councillor Ali, Humera Ali. She's in another meeting until about 6:30. Okay,
thank you very much.
Jack's here apparently. Jack's just sent a message saying he's here.
All right, good. Okay, welcome, Jack. I just want to confirm the voting members this evening. So can you please indicate when I call your name that you are here? So there's myself, first of all, as chair. Jane, can you confirm as vice chair that you're here?
Yes, I am here, Chair. Thank you.
You've heard that Councillor Humaira Ali will be joining us later. Jack, can you confirm you're here?
I'm here, yeah.
Thank you, Jack. Victor, can you confirm you're here, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. Helen, can you confirm you're here, please? Helen?
Yeah, I'm here.
Done?
Sorry, that was the mute button.
Sorry. I thought we'd lost you for a minute. Thank you. Councillor Gavin Edwards, can you confirm, please?
Yeah, I'm here, Ian.
Thank you, Gavin. Councillor Alice MacDonald, can you confirm, please?
Yeah, I'm here, Ian.
Okay. My ward colleague, Councillor Jason, is he here? Yeah.
Yeah, can confirm I'm
I
here.
haven't seen you. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good. And Councillor Victoria Lisa, please.
Yes, I'm here, Ian.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot Leanne. Dear, dear, terrible. Is Leanne here?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear, I'm getting told off. Right. Item 2 is notification of any other items of business which the chair deems urgent. As I've indicated, the late items are contained on supplemental agenda number 1 and relate to items 5, 7 and 8 of the agenda. There was also, you would have seen, been quite a bit of correspondence circulated to members in respect of item 6, the Brandon Estate, and Everton kindly drew all that together earlier today, and you should have all received a complete package on the Brandon Estate. I'm now going to move on to disclosure of interests and dispensations. Has any member got any interest or dispensation they wish to declare at this point, please? Okay, I take silence as no. Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 4, which is the minutes of our previous meetings? Can I say that the minutes for the 7th and for the 12th of May meetings are still in draft form and are not able to be submitted to this meeting for approval. Everton Roberts has informed me that the key action points arising from those meetings have been actioned and the relevant decision makers informed of our recommendations. In respect of the actions arising from the scrutiny call-in delivering a climate strategy for Southwark, the information the Overview and Scrutiny Committee requested is set out at item 5. In respect of the call-in in connection with the contract award, Generalist Community Legal Advice Services, officers have advised that the process from implementing our recommendations has begun. Officers met with both Citizens Advice Southwark and Southwark Law Centre on the 20th of May and discussed the concerns about the budget process, and I'm happy to say agreed a way forward for discussing how the council and advice services can work together on a long-term approach, especially to deal with the implications of COVID-19. I also wrote separately to Councillor Rebecca Lurie, requesting that monitoring information is shared with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the appropriate stages in that process. In respect of our recommendations to Cabinet on the Council's response to COVID-19, the recommendations have been forwarded to Cabinet members for their consideration, and their next meeting is scheduled for the 16th of July, where hopefully they will consider those recommendations, the outcome of which will be reported to our next meeting in July for noting.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt you, Chair. It's the 16th of June.
Sorry.
The Cabinet meeting is on the 16th of June.
I think I said that. No, I said the outcome.
Sorry.
I said the outcome will be reported to our next meeting in July.
Oh, my apologies, Chair.
It's all right, Everton. I'm glad you're on the board. So that will be reported to our next meeting in July for noting, and that can then inform our discussions on scrutiny relating to COVID-19, which I'm sure we'll all agree is a very serious and immediate topic. Okay, so if I can move on to item 5, please. Delivering a climate strategy for Southwark, the additional consultation information that we requested. If you can look at the supplemental agenda number 1, which has got Councillor Livingston's response, his letter to me. And obviously, you've all had time to read this, and I just wondered if any of you wish to make any comments on the Cabinet member's response. Don't all rush at once, obviously. So if there's no questions on that. Oh, Councillor Buck, I'm sorry. Jack, yeah. Are you there?
Sorry, yeah, sorry, Chair, I was just unmuting myself. Yeah, it was actually, I just did the little hand button for before we moved on to this item. I was just wondering if you had any news for the committee on when the actions following our annual budget scrutiny were going to be reported back from Cabinet and when we can expect those. I mean, it's understandable things have been delayed with everything that's going on, but just having some time scale from Cabinet on when we can expect to hear back from those would be good.
Okay, that's fair enough. Can I bring Everton in? Everton, can you respond to that point, please?
Yes, Chair. The actual OSC recommendations that were put forward to Cabinet in February were actually responded to at the time, and that informed the debate at Council Assembly. There is some action still to be followed up, and I will look into that in relation to speaking to the Director of Finance, and I will update members accordingly, Chair.
Thank you, Everton. Is that okay, Jack?
Sorry, if I may, Chair, is it possible because we had a long list of recommendations that we sent, and I appreciate that some of the recommendations have been responded on in an ad hoc way. I think it would be extremely useful for the committee and give us confidence that our actions have been followed out in the spirit that they were meant, if we could have almost an itemized summary, so recommendation, action, and list them through. I don't know if that's possible, but I mean, I would certainly like to see something like that, and I'm sure other members would. Okay,
we'll take that away, and I'll liaise with Everton and see what we can come up with for the next meeting, if that's okay. Jane, did you want to ask a question? Sorry, you're eating, are you?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Chair, I just wanted to ask something with reference to the letter about the climate change and this. Humera had said we should be reaching out to all these mutual aid groups.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that's very specific in his letter that they are going to do this.
Yes.
It does seem a bit of a disappointing to not take that moment, grab that moment.
Yes.
And reach out to them. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a chat with Councillor Livingston about that. And he said to me that that would be incorporated within the report which is going to Cabinet in July. If you look at the correspondence, he refers to that, and I think that will be lay out in more detail, not just the consultation process, but who will be consulted as part and parcel of that. So I think we just got to keep our eyes sharpened for the Cabinet report in July.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right then, if I can move on to item 6, please, which is to look at the Cabinet response to our recommendations on the Brandon estate when it appeared before us. As you know, we originally considered the issues relating to the Brandon estate at our meeting in November 2019. Our recommendations were noted at the December Cabinet meeting, and a Cabinet response to our recommendations was prepared for consideration at the Cabinet on the 11th of March. However, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, the Cabinet meeting was delayed until the 7th of April this year. This item has been added to this meeting's agenda to enable us to note the Cabinet response as part of the Council's scrutiny recommendations Cabinet response process. However, since the circulation of the agenda item, there has been a number of communications received, both from ward members in respect of some recent activities at Brandon Estate, and also from Mr. Lloyd from the Brandon in connection with the Jack Hobbs Club. The cabinet member, the relevant member, has also been provided with some additional information. Now, I'd just like to just take some time out just to cover a constitutional point, if I may. Strictly speaking, it would be more appropriate for these additional issues to be raised directly with the cabinet collectively or with the cabinet members individually themselves, because at the end of the day, they are the decision makers. This committee is not a decision-making meeting. We can't instruct officers and we can't direct officers. All we can do is make recommendations to the cabinet for their consideration. And so there are various mechanisms, as you know, which is available to do this through the ward members and residents themselves requesting deputations to the cabinet directly. However, I don't want to set a precedent this evening, but due to the nature of the concerns and the way that events have unfolded with COVID-19, etc., and because we were due to consider the recommendations from Cabinet this evening anyway, as part of this report, I will allow that further discussion on issues which have been raised both by Mr. Lloyd and by the ward members themselves. So therefore, we have a range of different parties that we will hear from this evening, and I intend to take them in the following order. We're going to have the report and issues on the Brandon referred to, first of all, by the relevant cabinet member. And is Evelyn with us this evening?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Evelyn. Then we'll listen to the ward councillors, their comments, and then we'll listen to the local residents. Now, is there two or three is there 3 or 4 local residents on the line at the moment? Can somebody assist me? Everton, is there 3 or 4 local residents?
The only resident I'm aware of is Mr. Tom Lloyd, Chair.
Oh, right, okay.
If I could say, Chair, there are 4 residents present at this meeting.
Okay, so can we just take their names formally for the record, so that it's on the video?
It's Tom Lloyd.
Yes.
Babs Jallows.
Yeah.
Ola Olongun. And Patrick Goodwin.
Yes.
And also Siobhan Convery.
And she's on the line with you, Tom, is that right?
No, she's on a separate computer in the other room.
Okay, fair enough.
And June Lewis.
Oh, right, okay. Blimey. Okay, good. Well, we've got
Blimey.
Sorry. Yes, we've got a good assortment of people there this evening. Thank you. Right. Okay. So let's start with Councillor Evelyn Akoto, please, and just hear what she has to say about the report and these other issues which have arisen since. Evelyn, would you like to address the committee, please?
Yes, so thank you, Chair. Thank you all panel members for the invite. I have sent several documents that gives you further information about this whole issue. So I don't want to go into too much detail because hopefully everyone should have read it. But you should have been sent the update to the OSCR recommendations where we are against those recommendations. Update on Jack Hobbs repairs and the project timeline. And what transpired with the repairs, and a response to Tom Lloyd's written submission, which was sent yesterday. I've received further information on that, which I wasn't able to send, but hopefully at the end I could capture some if I'm asked questions on it. So just to summarize, these documents should hopefully provide you with all the information needed pertaining to this matter. So I just want to pick up, as I've said, on some salient points that has been raised. Following our last appearance at OSC, we put together an approach that will enable TRAs to be updated and feed into progress of work. We issued RAG-rated issues log, which was sent to TRAs on a weekly basis. We held monthly meetings with them, And we also held fortnightly calls with ward councillors to allow the same level of input. Quarterly newsletters was agreed to update residents on the Brandon. I believe the first one went out in December. The second one was due to be sent out in March, but due to COVID, this had to be paused. The program of work, which is the major work on the Jack Hobbs, was completed as anticipated and as communicated to TRAs in February 2020. However, we suffered a leak from the second floor toilet, which took several attempts, unfortunately, to resolve. The Jack Hobbs timeline document provides further details on this. This was not something we anticipated, but have worked hard to resolve, and we have kept Tom informed and in the loop about the progress made. The program of work, as I've said, was completed in February. The Jack Hobbs was open to community use, and from January 2020, we had youth activities in the hall. Now, I note through the correspondence that there is some concerns, or there has been some concerns that these activities did not occur. Now, I'm not sure whether some of the providers, I think there was an attempt to invite some of the providers on here to speak for themselves today. I'm not sure whether they're here, but I assure you, I attended some of these activities, and they were in place. There were some that Tom highlighted that basically didn't happen. I'm not sure whether Chloe is on the line, and maybe she can respond to those as well. I will, however, say that one element which I'll agree that could have been improved and needs to be improved is how we communicate these activities. Hence, I believe in March, following discussions with ward councillors, myself and Stephen Gaskell spoke to our comms department and Chloe about pulling together an improved comms piece for youth activities. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this had to be halted as well. I acknowledge that there are elements that need to improve, but I must say that we have listened and we have been responsive to views and have worked hard to resolve these issues. Unfortunately, the current public health crisis, and I must remind everyone that we are still in the midst of a crisis, regardless of the easing of lockdown, forced us to pause most of this work and move rapidly to respond to the pandemic. The update on OSC recommendation document tells you more about some of this work that we've started and we had to put on hold, but we'll be picking up. Going forward, I mean, there's a number of things that we've already started discussions with the TRAs and with councillors, and things that we've started to put in place to further on the work. And as things ease and as we move to a business as usual from the council, we'll be able to pick this up. I know officers are due to meet next week to discuss the next time we can start having this weekly, basically providing this weekly issues log to TRAs, and basically resuming our monthly meetings and getting back to work, really. But in as much as we want to start doing all of this, we also have to be mindful that we're also dealing, as I've said, with the pandemic, and we have to be led by what is happening on the ground. So I think for time's sake, I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate that. Did the ward councillors want to add anything at this point? Is Eleanor here or Jane?
It's it's Alice. They're both on the call. I think we're just going to briefly cover between us the main points in the letter that we sent, and hopefully people have had a chance to read that. So I'm just going to cover the Jack Hobbs and activities for young people, and then Eleanor will talk to heating and hot water, and James to coordination and funding. I guess firstly, just thanks for all the residents who've come and joined this meeting, and thanks for the engagement so far. And as we noted in our letter, there has been an amazing array of community activity across the Brandon as ever in response to COVID. So thank you for everything you've been doing. We definitely kind of note the concerns that have been raised with us. In particular, before our last scrutiny committee, activities and support for young people. And I'm glad that Ola's here, because children as well has been something that we've been concerned about. Before COVID happened, we were due to have a kind of ward forum on activities for children and young people, and we were hoping that was the start of a really substantial dialogue with people across the estate about what was the provision that we really needed and how the Jack Hobbs could be a centre for the whole community. Unfortunately, we had to postpone that. So I think it's really important. I know the youth review has been postponed and we'll pick up again, but that we move forward as soon as we can with that and really ensure engagement with the community and parents across the Brandon and young people themselves. On the Jack Hobbs, and Tom and I and lots of residents have had conversations about this. I think we agree that there have been delays. COVID obviously has had an impact. I think we've set out in our kind of statements and practical measures that we know, some of which are underway, that we feel could help. So one of those is, I think it is really important that it is kind of agreed in writing with the TRA committee how their role in relation to the Jack Hobbs, so that they have the right space both for storage, to operate effectively, and to ensure that they can serve the community as best they can. So I think having something agreed with the committee in writing would be good, so that we can establish that as precedent going forward. I think how we engage the community and how the Jack Hobbs is used, you know, how bookings are prioritised, etc., would be really good to kind of communicate and discuss. I do think with the repairs and operations, you know, there has been some that's been unexpected, some that might have been expected, and having a kind of single point of contact in the repairs team as well that we can go to quickly to raise issues would be really helpful. And I think Evelyn's already touched on it, but the communications plan around young people, I think we did keep pushing for posters, and there wasn't any up, so we do kind of need to address that quickly. So those are the points I wanted to make. Maybe I'll just hand over to Eleanor for a couple of the other things that have been raised with us.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Eleanor?
Hi, thank you. So I think Alice has covered everything that we've sort of put in our note on the Jack Hobbs and that we'd like to discuss. I was going to touch briefly on the heating and hot water. As we discussed extensively when the Brandon estate was last brought to OSC, and have been a kind of key issue in the regular updates that we're getting. It's worth saying that so the Brandon estate is the Brandon's 1, 2 and 3 estates, which goes from the 6 kind of towers that are very, very well known to the Aberfeldy, Trevelyan and Hamworth blocks that run along John Ruskin Street. They run on 2 heating systems. So the towers are on one system, the Brandon system. Brandon's 2 and 3 are on the Wyndham system, which also serves the estate in Camberwell further south. Particularly on the Brandon's 2 and 3, winter before last, there were terrible outages, you know, Christmas and several weeks of people not having heating and hot water, which is utterly unacceptable. There have been many meetings on that and a programme of major works, which did see a better winter this year, which is good. I think, as I'm sure Councillor Edwards has found in his reviews on the district heating system, the systems are still not without issues despite extensive major works. So there've been two particular outages on either system during lockdown. On the Brandon Towers, there was an outage towards the beginning of lockdown, which was because some valves were stolen, but still needed good communication, needed to be dealt with quickly. And then very recently, so it just kind of was addressed last week, there was another outage on the Brandon 2 and part of the Brandon 2 and 3 system, which related to a pump, and I think it was an electrical failure in the end, but required a full day's outage and quite extensive investigation. I think that goes to show that the district heating systems that serve the estate are complicated, have required extensive major works, and need to constantly be reviewed by the housing team to make sure that everything that can be done to them is being done, and that there's proper planning on the programme of works that is needed to those really important systems. The housing team have been kind of keeping us up to date on that and keeping residents up to date. I think whilst my sense is that communication has got better since the kind of terrible winter before last we had, I think there is still some work to be done. I still feel too much that it is residents having to contact councillors and the TRA when they don't have hot water, rather than getting proactive updates from the council, which should always be the case. And another kind of continued issue, I think compensation for tenants is clearer and has got clearer, and I was pleased to see I think a more kind of discretionary approach to that. So on the last outage on Brandon 2, low power was treated as no power. So I think if you've got very little hot water, it's as good as having none. But it is still a weakness that the council doesn't have a clear policy on heating and hot water compensation for leaseholders. I've spoken to Councillor Williams on this. I know that there is a draft policy that I understand is going through the motions, but it is quite difficult. So, you know, particularly in lockdown at the moment, people are at home all the time. And, you know, to give you an example from the recent outage, I am aware of a resident who is at home. She's a carer for her disabled husband who is having to shield. And she has been, you know, having to boil kettles, having to use emergency heaters for hot water, and has been told, you know, the only way she can get any compensation is to make a kind of case-by-case complaint, which is obviously a whole kind of administrative process. I think that's on top of the major works bills which have just come out, and you know, I don't think any of us would be happy to be paying £80 a month for a system that doesn't work and then having to go through quite a complicated compensation process. So a point that we've made to Councillor Williams, and I know he's looking at, but I think one that we'd like to make here as well.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Is James there, please?
Yes, I am here, Chair, and I'll just speak very quickly, if that's okay, as I know you're keen to hear from local residents, and we all are too. Only to add a couple of points to what's already been said, and members will have heard from Councillor Okoto about the new system that was put in place a little while ago for managing particular issues on the Brandon, with Councillor Okoto as the cabinet member responsible and Stephen Gaskell as the representative from the Chief Executive's office. And I think it's just worth reminding members that the sort of the context for that system being implemented was very sadly a murder which took place on the Brandon estate. And as Eleanor was saying earlier on, that took place within the Brandon 3 part of the estate, which is not where the Jack Hobbs Club is. And so from my point of view, I noticed a number of improvements that did take place around the Brandon 3 area. These are things which should have been done previously. No one's denying that, but there was a real improvement in terms of things getting done when Councillor Okoto and Stephen Gaskell kind of arrived at the helm. So I would just say that if we can follow that approach, and my colleague Alice has already made the point about having a single point of contact for repairs issues, I think that would be a very good suggestion. But I think if we can try and follow that approach to apply to the Jack Hobbs clubs, that would be a very good approach. And I think perhaps I'll leave it there, because I know there's lots of other people that are wanting to speak.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, James. Eleanor referred to Councillor Edwards' commission. I don't know, sorry to put you on the spot, Gavin. I don't know if you wanted to say anything at this point, or do you want to say something later, Gavin?
Yeah, I can come in here if you want, Ian, if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I was listening with interest to that. We're at a stage with the district heating scrutiny now where we've gathered a lot of the kind of strategic information. We were just going through one or two other sessions when COVID hit of kind of case study sessions, and given the more recent developments on the Brandon, I must admit I haven't run this past anybody now. It just occurred to me when I was listening to the contributions being made there that we have a housing scrutiny meeting scheduled for the 24th of June this month, and I wonder whether or not it might be helpful for ward councillors, residents of the Brandon, to come along and tell us a little bit more about their experiences. I take on board what Eleanor said about there's been some improvement in communications, but clearly I think Eleanor and ward councillors and perhaps others have got some ideas about how that might be improved further. And I think that'd be an interesting element of the scrutiny report that we can eventually produce. So I just floating that as an idea. I'd be open to having that on the agenda for the 24th of June, and I'll leave it at that for now, Chair.
Right, no, that's a fantastic offer. Thanks, Gavin. I'm sure it will be taken up. Before I move on to the residents, can Ference, do you want to come in and say anything at this point? Or do you want to wait later?
I think actually a lot of it's been covered, to be honest with you. There's no question that the district heating needs a lot of work doing on it. I think when they described it as antiquated, the local councillor, that was actually a good description. we are actually have schemes. We've got schemes on site to do boiler and mains work at the moment. One of them's been held up by COVID, but we're looking to get that moving again now. I think the issue really, as Councillor Edwards has said, is devising the overall district heating strategy, because unfortunately Brandon is just one of the estates where we've got large estates with very old systems, and that strategy needs to find the right solutions and right funding across the whole of Southwark. And I think Councillor Edwards actually hit the nail on it. It's not just about Brandon. I take the point, and I will take that point back about leaseholder compensation. That clearly is an issue, and we've got actually an asset management managers meeting tomorrow morning, so we will raise that as well. And we will also look at about having a single point of contact for repairs issues as well, to see how that can best work.
Okay, that's great, fantastic. What I intend to do is open up to questions, but I'd like to hear from the residents first, so that we get a complete picture before we start questioning, just because I don't really want to duplicate this evening's proceedings. So if I can start with Mr. Lloyd first. I know you have a specific issue about the club, but you may want to comment on some of the more general ones as well while you've got the floor, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Lloyd. I'm Chair of the Brandon 1 TRA. I believe you've read the submission I made to the committee and also the follow-up response from Councillor Ricoto.
Yes.
I'm a little bit saddened by Councillor Ricoto's response, because it highlights to me the gulf in thinking strategy between our residents and Southwark at the moment. We've actually got a new strong TRA committee, and we've got a vision how we could improve things on the Brandon, but due to legacy issues, we do not have a home to operate from and have not had for many years. This is especially sad as we've got a purpose-built TRA hall, the Jack Hobbs Club, on our estate, which has been sitting largely empty for the last 2 years. It was once a community hub serving as a state focal point and promoted social integration, which is an essential element in maintaining a successful community. And directly across from the Jack Hobbs Club, there's the Brandon Youth Club, another large purpose-built space, sadly only used 6 hours per week. So there's a wealth of community space available on the Brandon, which is underused. For years, we as a TRA have been limited by a lack of space and resources that restricted us to a small space within the Jack Hobbs Club. We've got one room which seats 15 people, and this is a TRA that is representing 665 properties with approximately 1,500 residents. Without adequate space, we as a TRA cannot invest in infrastructure, and without that we cannot organise or host events for our residents. In light of your flagship resident involvement review policy, which is currently being implemented, and I'm going to quote from that policy, which says, "Southwark has a long and proud history of tenants and residents working together to improve homes and lives of people in our housing. Our tenants and residents associations have always been central to this. The approach set out in the following pages aims to strengthen this vital part of community infrastructure of the borough, maximising support, training and funding available to TRAs, and further strengthening the relationship between tenants, residents and their councillors." So that's what you're telling us you're trying to achieve. Sadly, we find ourselves in a situation where revenues that would traditionally go to our TRA through hall hire are being diverted to Southwark and controlled by the hall manager from the communities team. We as a TRA, with no home, no infrastructure and very limited funding. The majority of the revenues would normally be controlled and used by the TRA for our residents are administered by a Southwark hall manager and not our residents. Now that I've given you that little bit of background, I'd like to drill into a couple of specifics in Councillor Ricoto's response, and hopefully we can start to narrow our divergent positions.
Okay, if you can keep it concise, I'd appreciate it.
I'm doing my best. I rehearsed this.
I know you are. Just continue.
The first 3 points, I'm going to make no further comments. On point number 4, and the essence of point number 4 was youth events not taking place. All I can say is I take an evening walk on the Brandon, and I make a point of walking past the Jack Hobbs Club. And on the following dates, I was surprised to find the hall locked up with the lights out, despite events supposedly meant to be taking place. Dates were namely the 3rd of February, the 4th of February, the 6th of February, and the 9th of February. On one of those dates, the 3rd of February, I was actually in the company of Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Coldwell, and we actually went into the hall, and it was quite obvious nothing was happening. I would also contest that posters have been put up in the notice boards because I was we were the only people with the keys. So events that were meant to be happening, some of them didn't happen, and they certainly weren't being advertised on the estate. Point number 5, which is the relationship between the TRA and the communities team. I would say the communications between the TRA and the hall manager have been sporadic. The hall manager tends to selectively respond to emails, which causes us much frustration. And we don't have any regular meetings with the hall manager, which you would expect, given that we supposedly share a hall, a premises, and a vision. And we believe that needs to change, and regular meetings should be scheduled between the TRA and the hall manager to help rebuild this strained relationship. Point number 6 was the resident involvement review and lack of resources allocated to the TRA. Councillor Ricotta's response to this was to offer to direct me in the direction of finding a solution to this, but I find this quite baffling. We pointed this issue out to Councillor Ricotta at every meeting we've been in, that our TRA does not have a home, does not have resources, does not have adequate funding compared to the other 2 TRAs on the Brandon. Point number 7, which is lack of space allocated to our TRA. We really can't, we've got one tiny room, we can't accumulate any items that could be used for and by our residents. Items like tables and outside seating, gazebos, sports equipment, gardening accessories for our large active gardening group. The list goes on. We need some dedicated space to store equipment. And the last point, a lack of viability of our TRA and input into running the estate. From where I see it, the youth provision that's being brought onto the Brandon seems to be very much parachuted in. And we were invited to one meeting with the youth provision providers, but not a lot came out of that. There's the other thing I'd say is there's absolutely no provision being considered for any of the other age demographics who live in our estate. All of the focus is on youth provision. The TRA doesn't have a space to operate out of to put on anything for anyone else. So what I would say in conclusion, and I am finished getting to the end now,
okay.
The Jack Hobbs Club is an underused building, and we would request that some more space be allocated to the TRA so that we can run TRA business to serve our residents. We would like some dedicated storage space within the Jack Hobbs Club. We also have spoken with Stephen Douglas and about the way we are financially disadvantaged by not having a hall that we can rent out and generate some income to the TRA, and hall hire is the lion's share of most TRA's actual income. And that conversation has started with Stephen Gaskell. I think the relations between the TRA and the hall manager need to be improved in light of the poorly managed works programme and ongoing communication issues. I would like to welcome Evelyn's suggestion to reactivate the weekly issues log and the monthly meetings. That needs to happen. And the one other thing we'd like some sort of system set up to evaluate the benefits and attendance of youth provision services by Brandon residents, because from what I've seen and from speaking to the young advisors, the event, what's happened so far has been poorly attended and very few Brandon residents even knew about it. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I appreciate you keeping that fairly tight this evening. I'm just going to move on to the other residents here that might want to add to that. Obviously, I'd appreciate it if you didn't duplicate what Tom's just said, but if you've got something additional or some other aspect to add, then we'd be quite grateful to listen to that. I'll just go through the names as I've got them here, so it's just a random order. So I've got Ola first. Do you want to say anything at all? Is she there? No. Allah? No. Okay. Well, she might come back. Patrick, do you want to say anything?
Just that I fully back what Tom said, and given the sort of predicted social impact of the lockdown, how important it will be to have the hall ready as we come out of lockdown, so that we can start doing activities for the whole community. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I've got. Is it Babs? Is it? Is that? Did I get the name?
Yes. Hi. Good evening, Chair.
Hi.
Yes, I'm Babs Chalo. I live in Brownhouse. I was a treasurer for the TRA for many years. I did hear what Tom has said, and I sort of have a different view. I do agree mostly with some of the issues that Tom has raised. But I as a resident of Brandon, I am more concerned the relationship between the TRA and the council. I think we can have a better working relationship. I think we can serve the community well. It's all right to get money from the council, but I want taxpayers' money to be spent respectfully. I have my son around, and we try to take maths to some of the local residents, some of my neighbors. And I think that is an area where we can help. It's not just about gardening or other form of infrastructure, but it's also about liaising with the community itself. So the problem we have right now is we have AGM every year. So people will come and vote at the AGM. You will never see them in meetings until the next AGM. So effectively, we just have a one-man show. And I don't think we are best represented. And genuinely, I don't know how can the council help us to make sure we resolve that. We have the resources, have the manpower, and have a better relationship with the council. I believe we are part of the council. We're just not on the payroll, but we can work hand in hand with the council. And I don't think that's happening.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for letting us know that. The next person I've got on the list is it Jill? Jill Lewis, is that right?
June, hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, thank you for the meeting. I'm the chair of Brandon 2 TRA. I think a few of the leaseholders have sent in their questions by email to Everton, which is what they were asked to do.
Okay.
But I was just checking to see if somebody had actually sent me one, but they haven't. The main questions that we have is round about leaseholders, heating, hot water, outages, and paying twice. And we can give you the breakdowns. We've given them to Alice and Eleanor. They've been really super helpful. We've got a new residence officer, Matthew, who's walked around the estate a few times, so things are looking up. So we have a good relationship with them. My argument mainly is with the council directly and the structures that are in place. You can make, you know, they tell you there's an outage and people sign off for the text, but they don't receive the text, so they're not forewarned. So if you say there's a shortage going to be on Monday and you tell them today, at least on Monday they can make a plan. Most of the time they don't get the text, so they don't get warned. So that's an issue as well. Secondly, we received a letter about what was happening after the event, which sort of didn't make sense. So for the example that Councillor Eleanor used about paying twice, we pay in advance for a service we don't receive. Somewhere along the line, that credit has to come back to us. And so far, we're not receiving that credit at all. The maintenance of the estate is poor. The trees, the cuttings and things like that, which should have happened last year, haven't happened. But I understand with COVID, and I've got hopes that with the new residence officer, Matthew, he's on board, things will be put in place. On the positive side, we've got a lovely children's playground, and hopefully the other areas are going to be up and running. Our hall, the Rachel Lee Community Hall, is well known. I'd like it to be used a bit more, but we have plans for it once COVID is we're out of lockdown. But the main thing is the fact that we are paying twice.
Okay.
So if somebody could look into that ASAP.
Okay.
That's one of the main issues, and also for the ground maintenance. If we don't receive it, why are we getting charged for it?
Okie dokie. Great. Thank you for being specific. I appreciate it. Is Siobhan, isn't it? Is that right? Is it Siobhan? No? Is Ola back? No? No.
Yes, hello there.
Oh, you're there?
Yes, sorry,
Yes,
the connection kind of went off for me earlier.
Oh, okay. So,
yes, with regards to the youth activity, right? We have spoken back and forth with Councillor Alice, and I did stated that a lot of the youth on the Brandon are not the one in the activity center for the Jack Hub, because with the last minute meeting we had, we did kind of question some of the youths in there, and they made it known to us that they come from Camberwell. So, and a lot of the parents I've spoken to on the Brandon actually feel like they're not getting enough communication from Chloe Newman, because half of the time they don't even know there's an activity for the children in the Jacob. Because the moment I said to them, why is your child not in Jacob? They're like, what's going on in Jacob? So the lack of the communication is really is there to see. And the flexibility on the timing as well is not something they can work with, because at 9 o'clock in winter, it's really dark. And you're asking parents to trust you, not knowing who you are, for their child to come out on the estate when there's tinted window cars driving around. So come out, no security guard there, no police patrol, nothing to stand in front of Jacob and make sure everyone gets home safely and go about their business. And you want them to actually allow their children to come out at that time of the day is not something they're willing to do. And I'm not going to ask them to do it either.
Okay. All right.
So, and also all the spaces that Tim Lloyd have stated, those spaces have been there from when I've moved on to the estate, and they're sitting empty. And the library as well, we would like to make it, family friendly. There's no toilets in there. It needs a bit refurbishment. And the timing as well needs to be more flexible. Because on a Friday, it closes at 2, and the children don't finish from school until 3:30. And it's open on the weekend from 2 to 7.
Yeah.
So, all of those things are just something that it really needs to be addressed. We need the council to do something. If they are really serious about listening to parents, then these are the things that they need to sort out.
Okay. Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Is Siobhan with us now?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Hi, sorry about that.
Don't worry.
No, I just wanted to back up what Tom was saying, but also point out that I think he has done an awful lot of good work in the last few years. We do want a better relationship with the council. He's done a lot of work with the website, which would help us engage with young people, as opposed to the way things have been done for years previous to the last 2 years when he's been chair of the TNRA. A lot of the meetings took place in a small room. It was the same people for years. Nothing new or inventive was done to reach out to a broader audience, which would help people who aren't able to come to the meetings when the times aren't suitable. So I would say, he has done a lot of good work. He has got new ideas. We've got a new energy. We've got a lot of young people and new people on the committee. We are willing to work with the council, and that's what the communication has been very frustrating for us. So we need the whole. We want to put on things for the community. As Ola said, we want to engage with parents and put things on for people on our estate of all ages. So the whole is necessary, and we're doing our best to communicate in other ways without it and reach out to as many people as possible.
Great. Okay, that's received loud and clear. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to throw out questions. I've got 3 members who've indicated so far. I'll take them in the order I received. So the first one is Humera. Welcome. She's there somewhere.
Hi, sorry. I think before me it was, if you don't mind, Chair, I saw Jack and Jane had indicated, so I'm happy for them to go first, if you're okay.
Well, they're after you actually, but anyway, if you wish.
Jack. Yeah.
Come on, Jack, do you want to go? You've been handed the floor.
Thanks. Yeah, sure. It was less a question and more an observation from a previous OSC meeting, and that was during the budget challenge process. I do remember Duncan Whitfield, who's the Chief Financial Officer, did mention to us when we were discussing district heating systems, and for the residents of the Brandon, I'm one of the ward councillors for the Aylesbury estate, so we feel your pain on district heating systems to the fullest. But I remember Duncan saying that there was some strategic analysis on what the council was going to do with its district heating networks, that those conversations on a kind of top level were going to have to start to be had in the next year. And I was wondering maybe, given that this item has come back to overview and scrutiny again on district heating, and that Gavin is taking a report on district heating from the Housing Scrutiny Subcommittee, whether OSC should put it to Cabinet that we would like to know where progress on that kind of strategic view on district heating is, and whether we should be able to expect any kind of larger reports back to overview and scrutiny in the next couple of months or year.
Okay, thank you. Jane, do you want to come in now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just unmuting myself.
You're finishing for dinner.
Be quiet, Ian. You're going to bring that up every time. I shall pay you back one day. I just wanted to understand. There are 2 TNRAs on the Brandon, or 3? For some reason, I thought there might be 3. Was it just 2?
3.
3. And you'd all use the Jack Hobbs, would you, or you have your own? Right, that's what I wondered, because apart from the heating and hot water, which, trust me, I'm also a leaseholder on a communal heating system, it strikes me that those buildings, the public buildings, seem to be causing a little bit of difficulty to everybody, not necessarily being used in the way that they should be used, favouring the residents first and then all others afterwards, including the library. That Ola's point was very good. The library shouldn't close on a Friday at 2 when the young come out and want to use it. But, you know, we want to encourage libraries. But I was just trying to understand, in the Jack Hobbs itself, is there an appropriate room for Tom and his residents and members of his committee to meet? Is it that there isn't an appropriate room, or there is an appropriate room but it doesn't have appropriate furniture? Sorry to be going to basics, but I just needed to understand what the situation is.
Okay.
Can I answer that question?
Well, I think you've already answered it before, because if I can recollect, what you said is it's big enough for 15 people, the room that you've currently got. Whether it's adequate is another.
I would say it's not. I would say it's not adequate, and we've got no place to store anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Right.
Now I'm going to bring Humera in, but Gavin has indicated he wants to respond to a point that Jack made earlier. But I'll take Humera first, please.
Okay, hi. Thank you everyone for coming this evening, and can I thank officers for the pack, because in the last meeting I had asked for a plan for all of the actions and activities. In this pack I've got part of a plan but not all of it, so apologies if the question has already been answered because I had to arrive late. The plan, the schedule I should say in here, focuses very much on the Jack Hobbs Club and repairs to it. But what I'm not seeing is what is the plan around the community engagement piece? And I think there was a number of other pieces that came originally as well. I mean, June has referred to issues around being double charged. So there was a number of topics, and I was expecting to see all of those on one plan. Does that plan exist? And who is ultimately responsible for making sure that plan is delivered? So when I say responsible, there's 2 people actually. Who's the accountable person, whose head rolls, and who's the person who's actually driving that plan on a day-to-day basis? So I think there's 2 or 3 questions in there.
Okay.
Should I respond to that?
Please, Evelyn. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I was going to take Gavin first, Evelyn.
Okay. Okay. That's fine.
And then I'll bring you in. Yeah. Gavin, please.
Sorry, Evelyn, I didn't mean to cut across you.
It's fine.
I just wanted to just come back on the point that Jack had made. I think it's a fair point because we've Housing Scrutiny Commission. We've taken a couple of meetings on the big strategic piece of work that the council is doing across the borough on district heating. With what's happened with COVID and the delays that we've all experienced, the plan is to bring an update on that back again to the meeting I mentioned earlier on June the 24th. So really that meeting is to a large extent going to be dominated by the subject of district heating, particularly as I've just volunteered to take a look at the particular example of the Brandon and the communications there as well. So I think that would be a good place to do what Jack is suggesting and get that update. And then, of course, that allows us to directly feed the work into the report that's going to be produced by the Housing Scrutiny Committee. So I just wanted to make that suggestion.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Gavin. Sorry, Evelyn, to cut you off.
Yeah. So with regards to a plan, just to say that what we did, we used an issues log. So this issues log basically laid out all the issues and the issues that the TRAs raise, the things that residents raise, things that the ward councillors raise, and we use that as a way of logging and checking the progress of work against what I said we would do. This was sent to TRAs on a weekly basis every single Monday, and they had an opportunity at that point to say, okay, we are, and was rag rated as well, I must add, to say, okay, no, things are not going well in here, it's red or it's amber or it's green. And if we were to change the rag rating, we will agree, can we change it to green now? We think this is completed, and it will be an agreement. If it's an amber, we will all agree that this is still an amber. So this is the way we track the timeline on the number of issues and work we had to do on the Brandon.
Okay, great. What was I going to say? I was going to say, obviously, a lot of this stuff has been held up since we last met in November, has been held up because of COVID-19. And I know we've all mentioned it, and we all appreciate the circumstances. I mean, the key recommendation, the key issue I think which is coming out of this is still the aspect of resident involvement and communication, which we did cover at our previous meeting. And as you know, we recommended that this core group be set up of local councillors, residents and officers. I'm keen to get any feedback on that from the residents, because obviously that really is the first port of call for a lot of these issues. But I'm also conscious that that Gavin will pick up the heating issue, and again, as I said at the meeting, this is before Humera arrived, but we're not a decision-making body. We're only receiving the cabinet report on the previous recommendations that we submitted to cabinet. We're not issuing a fresh set of recommendations and opening the whole issue up again. It's really just to see on those issues which have come to light since, but obviously with COVID-19, then that's delayed a lot of those recommendations being put into full force. So just on the core group, does anybody want to comment about the core group at all on the residents side, if I may, or the local councillors, to be honest, because they're both involved? Does anybody want to comment on that?
I mean, it's Alice.
Yes.
I think, I think as James said, we've kind of felt that the coordination mechanisms has improved, and the issues log is useful, and actually probably issues log is the wrong name because it is a kind of plan in many ways for what is meant to happen when. So I think, as we said, if we can, don't know what Stephen Gaskell's role will be, but if we can continue to have a senior point of contact that coordinates those meetings, and we all recognise that the constraints on kind of officers' time at the moment because of COVID, but as soon as we can restart those, the better, really. So, but it feels like it works as a structure, okay. And we should just build on it.
Okay, Tom, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say the issues log has been suspended since the outbreak of COVID,
Sure.
so we're kind of back to being in the dark as to what's going on again.
Sure. I understand. I understand. Sorry, yeah, go on.
I've just seen in the chat Humera's questions about who's accountable. Well, Stephen Gaskell is the lead officer for all things branding, and I'm the cabinet member responsible to kind of coordinate things. So Stephen Gaskell will be the person. But I would say as well, being accountable, I will be accountable as well. So myself and Stephen Gaskell will be that. Who is driving that plan? I would say all of us are driving that plan, because whatever goes in the plan is agreed by the TRAs and is agreed by us as well. We don't put anything in the plan that the TRA do not agree. So when you say who is driving that plan, we are all driving that plan. If there's something that's not right on the plan, then the TRAs or ourselves, we have an opportunity, all the ward councillors have an opportunity to basically have an input at that point. And with regards to the issues not be suspended, yes, I made the call to suspend it. I mean, we were going into a period of lockdown, and the council was basically responding to the pandemic, you know, and we were going into a more of a kind of a command and control protocol in the council. There was no way we would have been able to continue sending the issues log on a weekly basis, especially as when most of our employees were redeployed to other departments. So I made the call to suspend it until things have calmed down or things will come back to business as usual. So that was the reason why it was suspended.
Okay. Well, I mean, now that sort of lockdown's being gradually unlocked, then hopefully we'll be able to get if we can't get a physical meeting, then at least we can get something, a virtual meeting like this, which will include the residents, officers, and local ward councillors. But it seems that that's quite an imperative thing that needs to happen. I think coming out of this discussion, then I think that as we said, the heating issue will be picked up by Gavin's commission, and you're all invited, I presume, Gavin, to attend that meeting and to talk about the heating there. Before I deal with the Jack Hobbs Club, the more general issues on the estate which have been raised by Ola and others. I mean, the local ward councillors are here. I'm sure that they would have picked that up and they'll run with that on your behalf. In regard to the Jack Hobbs Club, then again, as I say, it's imperative that we get this core group and that we get the communications up and running as quickly as possible, as they ought to have been. I know with COVID-19, obviously it's been a problem, but we need to have best use of that centre, and we need to have our residents feeling that they're being listened to, they're being engaged with. In terms of Humera's point, well, you've heard that Stephen Gaskell is the main officer who's got oversight of this, and Evelyn is the main cabinet member leading on this. There may be some aspects that might refer to Councillor Williams's brief. I don't know on the housing front, but certainly the community side of things relates to Evelyn's brief. Okay, so I'm sorry because I'm conscious of the time and we have to take a break now. So unless there's anything imperative, I intend to take a break for 10 minutes. Is that okay? So can I thank you, those that don't wish to stay there, they can leave. And thank you once again for coming this evening. And we will be in contact with you just to confirm what was said and agreed this evening. Thank you once again for coming. And
thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We'll be back in 10 minutes time. Okay, thank you. Night.
Thank you.
For those who are leaving. So I'll be back at 20 past 10. 20 past 10, sorry. 20 past 7, sorry. Freudian slip.
20 past 7.
I'm so used to the 4-hour meeting. Yes, yes. 20 past 10, please. God, I've done it again. 20 past 7. Oh dear.
Hi, Ian. Thank you very much for doing these breaks. It's most appreciated. Although you're on mute, so I didn't hear what you said. You could be swearing at me for all I know.
Yes, it's after the watershed, so I can. Well, no, it isn't quite. So
not quite. You're determined to be much later than it actually is, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's just Freudian. That's all. Okay, are most people back with us now? Or I can only see 4 people. I don't know.
You have reached your 20 past deadline, Chair, but people are starting to arrive now.
Chair, I am here. It's Helen. Sorry, I'm just feeding my daughter, so my camera's off.
Oh, okay. At least somebody's getting fed. I'll eat something later, no doubt. Right, Jack's back, Jason's back, Gavin's back. Yes, I think we're all here then. Yep. Okay. Right. If I can move on to item 7, please. That's the amendment to the terms of reference of the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, reconfiguration of Lambeth Hospital mental health inpatient services. As you know, this item is contained on supplemental agenda number 1. I mean, it's fairly, factual. There's nothing, I don't think, which isn't immediately obvious in this report. I don't know if Councillor Olisa wanted to comment on the report at all, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's just a basic tighten up the terms of reference, because there's going to be 4 services that are going to be moved to the Maudsley site, but also there'll be one of the services moved out to Bethlehem Hospital, which is in Bromley Ward. So rather than just saying the terms of reference refers to Lambeth CCG, it's been actually tweaked to say it's actually NHS South East London. So that covers the 6 CCGs, because obviously there's amalgamation of services, but also there's transfers from Lambeth out to Bromley. So we felt that it needed to be tweaked to reflect that it's not just Lambeth and Southwark, it's actually the 6 CCGs are actually involved. So so that's why it was felt that NHS England would have to change the terms of reference to actually reflect that. Obviously, if there was a contentious issues, then somebody would come back to us to say, no, you can't change that. But it's just to reflect the fact that it's not just the 2 boroughs, Lambeth and Southwark. It actually involves the other, as we call it, the NHS South East London, which covers the 6 CCGs. So that's it, really. So it's quite just a point of reference to make you aware of that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment at all on this report, or can we just agree it as on paper, please? Agreed?
Agreed.
No, I take silence as dissent.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so that was usually unanimous. Let's move on then to item 8, please, the work programme for 2020-21. As you know, this item is also contained in supplemental agenda number 1. As you know, as we agreed at the last meeting, I asked members to come forward with items for consideration for future OS meetings. But I also wanted us to just check on where we are with our current year. And as you'll see, Appendix 1 lists the current year, and Appendix 2 is for the future. I just wanted to pick out a couple of things, if I may. As we know, Victor has been liaising with the person to come and speak to us about the LGBT consultation. I believe that what the latest position is, that person will be with us at our meeting on the 13th of July. Is that correct, Victor? Have you got any additional information at all or update?
That's everything that I understand as well.
Okay, great. Because this has been around since before I was chair, so I'm quite keen to get the item before the committee, if we may. And then the other one was the local funds, which I know Humera and Alice have been looking at, and they were going to bring forward a proposal at some stage, but obviously with everything that's been going on, I think that's still work in progress. Is that correct, Humera?
Yeah, so Alice and I have had a brief conversation on this, and we proposed to put it into the next work year because obviously so much disruption's happened. We wanted to do a reset with Duncan and team on that piece of work, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. That's right, Alice? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. Good. Okay. Thanks. Now, yes, where was I now? Yes. Just looking at Appendix 1, you see that we've looked at 16 different items over the course of the year. So, you know, we've had a fairly bulky workload there. But everything has been impacted by COVID-19 and will still be impacted, I think, for some time to come. And I really think that's going to figure quite largely in all our future deliberations and discussions and the topics that come before us. As you know, we're still waiting for the Cabinet to meet on the 16th of June to consider the recommendations we made at our previous meeting. And hopefully we should be a lot clearer forward once they've deliberated that. The other thing to bear, which I'm conscious of to bear in mind, is that technically we're in the new municipal year, but we've still got the same committees with the same membership. So it's a bit of a sort of halfway house at the moment. The likelihood is that we won't have the new committee structures and the new membership, potential new membership, until September at the earliest, you know, possibly later. So in which case it means that the new committee, in whatever configuration it will be, will only have 6 months life, if I can put it that way, before the next annual meeting of the council. So and a large part of that, in the middle of that 6 months, I say for a good 1 or 2 months, we'll have the budget, and it will be a very key budget this time around, as they all are, but I think this one in particular will be very key. And we'll have the budget landing right at smack in the middle of that. So I am very conscious that there are many issues out there that we need to drag in, but I do think we're going to have to be very precise and concise, as I said before, about the topics we choose, because we really won't have the length of time to do, you know, a very long or deep dive into any particular issues, because we just won't have the time left in the council calendar or the number of meetings which we can meet because of the budget in the middle of it. I mean, I am pleased that the Cabinet has already taken steps in regard to what our recommendations is to revise it in terms of its objective timescale of COVID-19. Obviously, that has an eye on it, and that in this sort of half period, that the current commissions complete their work, complete the reports that they're doing, and I'm looking to the chairs to really try and finish their reports by the end of July, certainly by the time we get to September, because one of our terms of reference is to supply an annual report to the council, and I'd rather supply an annual report once all the commissions are finished. And I know most of them have still got one more meeting before the end of July. And if we can get those reports done and get that annual report done by September, then that sort of completes and caps off the year that we've just had. So I'm very conscious at this moment in time that I'd like to get that pushed as much as we can before time runs out. I'm also conscious of the fact that I must say we've had a very extensive list provided by Jane and Humera and Victor, and there's a lot of issues there which I think there'd be common agreement on. But at this stage, what I'd like to do is obviously some members might want to suggest other areas, is not sort of draw up the definitive list this evening, but when we meet again in July, is to draw up the list then. Obviously, we'll have informal discussions in between then, so we can perhaps get an agreed list before we get to our meeting in July. And hopefully we can then have the whole of the work plan laid out until next May. There was one question that Humera raised, and I don't know if Everton's in a position to respond to that, but it was in relation to issues around the council's performance. I think it goes to the audit committee. I could be wrong, but Everton, do you want to comment?
Yes, Scrutiny does have a monitoring role, and I've advised Councillor Humera Ali that I think Overview and Scrutiny Committee would be the most appropriate committee to receive that information.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Good. Well, I didn't want to take away the work of another committee, but if it is our responsibility, then obviously we'll do that. So we can certainly look at that for the coming year. Okay. I've got a couple of members who want to comment at this point. Jack, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just maybe on. Yeah, it was very much a question, which is that given the intermediary period that we're kind of in now, with technically the council year finishing, but the council assembly, the annual council assembly delayed, how many times, Chair, are you planning on OSC actually meeting between now and the potentially rearranged council assembly? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but we do normally take a break during the summer school holidays. I know obviously school times are a bit up in the air at the moment, but when we're thinking about a work programme between now and the next council assembly, which is really what I think the focus should be on, how many meetings are we actually going to have? 1, 2?
Well, on the present course, we're due for one a week, but as much as I'd love that, I don't think that's practical. I'm glad you've raised that question, because again, until we know for certain exactly when the annual council meeting will be, it's difficult to sort of judge the meetings at either side of that. But we have our meeting on the 13th of July, and then the next scheduled meeting in the calendar isn't until the 9th of November. And to be perfectly honest, you know, because of the situation with COVID-19, I think that's too far away. That's too much of a gap. And what I'd like to do is get your agreement to request that Everton looks for a meeting, say towards the end of September sometime, certainly the beginning of October at the latest. But because I do think that we'll have the August break as normal. But there again, you know, if I'm not advocating it, but you know, if something's called in, or if members, you know, request a meeting, a certain amount of members request a meeting, then we have to have a meeting. But what I'd rather do is to try and program it, because I know different people obviously have got commitments, etc., etc. So we've got the 13th of July, and then we'll probably have one towards, say, the end of September. But we'll get more update on that when we meet again in July. But that's what I was proposing.
Chair, could I just
yep.
come in just with a
Sure.
short follow-up then on that? Sure. Because I mean, I think the rest of the committee will probably agree that the most pressing, urgent and important business that we have potentially coming down the road is the government's financial response to the COVID pandemic. And although they've kind of been stalling so far, we would expect an announcement on the financial settlement in relation to the pandemic at some point over the summer. Is it potentially worth the committee sending the question to Duncan and the finance team of whether it would be relevant to have them come in over the summer and give us an update? Because I mean, this is going to affect everything that the council does in a really significant way. And I think although we've done budget already this year, you know, that response will affect our entire work programme for next year as well.
Sure. Well, all these things are a movable feast, and I think at our previous meeting, one of our recommendations quite clearly was for the such a report to come to the cabinet in July, and I'm expecting that that report will be there in July. It's all dependent on what the government decides and when the government decides, etc. But certainly we've requested that update from the cabinet for its July meeting. So I haven't heard anything to the contrary at this stage. So there will be something there. I'm also conscious, you know, even if people aren't going abroad or they're not going to test their eyesight up to the northeast of England, the fact is that, you know, people will be taking annual leave of some sorts, which they've already got programmed in their own calendars over the August. So it might be a problem trying to get some sort of meeting arranged in August. But as I say, it's a suck it and see situation. We've got our meeting in July. We can reassess that. I'm looking for an additional meeting at the end of September. Let's see where we go from there, and we can revise it again once we meet in July. I'm conscious I've got a number of people who are queuing up. So who's next then? I think it's Helen was next, I think, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a bit of a reflection on the meeting that we had on the council's COVID response and how we deal with that going forward, because obviously, as you've indicated, I think everyone agrees that this is going to be the lens through which we view kind of everything, all of our kind of council services, and the financial settlement, as Jack points out, is going to dominate really. I found, I think probably lots of it was a 4-hour meeting when we had that discussion around the council's COVID response. And it felt like we were going into so much very important detail across kind of every aspect of the authority's work, whether it was housing and homelessness, adult social care, the local economy, etc. And I think it's a bit of a plea, I suppose, that when we're thinking about how we deal with the COVID responses through scrutiny going forward, that we maybe think about the kind of overall response. So things like the council's coordination, the financial settlement, etc., the preparedness issues, but that we don't all in one go try to deal with everything all at once, because I think there are going to be kind of separate things that almost deserve their own inquiries, whether that's, as I said, the kind of impact on homelessness across the borough, whether that's a deeper dive retrospectively into adult social care. So let's maybe have a think about how we do it in a manageable way.
Okay, no, that's useful. Thank you. Sorry, my chat screen was filling up. I missed I missed a couple of people at the top who were off my screen. So I've got Gavin and Humera. Gavin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I was too quick for my own good there. You, in a way, both you and Helen have kind of covered what I was going to say. To be honest, I just think putting on our work program at an appropriate point, and I know the timing is crucial, and that's something that you yourself as chair will keep an eye on. We should look back in a kind of across the piece way about the councils. We've had a good session kind of during the pandemic, during the lockdown anyway, you know, which was absolutely right that we did that. I think at a certain point, we as a committee, OSC, should take a step back and then try and do some form of review and come up with the report and recommendations. But I take Helen's point that there may be some hiving off that needs to happen as well in terms of certain aspects of it. The commissions, however, it needs to happen. So that was just my suggestion.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the list that was provided by Jane, Humera, and Victor, some of those issues can go to the commission. I think it wasn't just for Main OSC that was provided. So yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Humera's next. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just think following Helen and Gavin, I'm proposing just a couple of options as well, which for people to chew on, is if we've got a shortened year and we're going to be heavily impacted by COVID, is this group happy to perhaps frame a series of scrutiny sessions with the COVID lens for next year on the more cross-cutting themes about the impact? So rather than, because we've got, to Helen's point, to try and do everything in a day is not healthy. And actually probably where are the hardest hitting areas that we need to cover? Because that might fulfill an agenda. The alternative, which I'm not sure is necessarily viable, is to have a special COVID committee to review some of those COVID specific tasks, and OSC would then continue with the main plan. But that to me doesn't make sense, because I think the whole council is going to be very much tilted towards recovering from this COVID era. Not only financially, but with mental and physical health and businesses and so on and so forth. So just a suggestion from me.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, and it's very sensible. And I think members probably individually and collectively are sort of coming to that conclusion too. That's probably the best way forward. But before I finalise that, Jane wanted to speak, please. She can't speak. Oh dear. Oh, there we are. Oh no, she's
Sorry,
gone
Chair,
again.
I actually withdrew my question because everybody answered the various parts of my question. So apologies, I don't have a question now. Thank you.
Oh, that's a great shame. I was looking forward to it.
Oh,
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to comment? Have we agreed a way forward? I think, to be fair, a lot of this rests on what the cabinet decide on their June meeting, because that will impact, I think, largely on how we shape our work programme based on COVID-19. Let's wait and see what the cabinet decides and the recommendations they agree or amend or disagree, and then when we meet again in July, we can then at least have that knowledge on which we can base our future work programme. Obviously, everything that's been submitted to date will be included when we have those deliberations in July. But I think that's probably the best way forward. People agree? No dissent? Thank you. Good. Okay, so can we leave that item now? And I don't think there's anything else, to be honest. Goodness me, it's only 20 to 8. Everton, we haven't forgotten anything. I just want to check before we all leave. I wouldn't want to have to rearrange the meeting again next week.
No, that's it, Chair.
Okay, good, fantastic, wonderful. Well, thank you all for attending this evening, and especially our visitors from the Brandon Estate. We appreciated everything you said, and thank you once again for taking the time to join us this evening. And we all hope that those issues will get sorted out as quickly as possible. So thanks again for your contributions, and I wish you all well. Keep safe. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ian. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.